Good morning, everybody. I've been working for a systems integrator for 13 years, and then for a bank for 5 years, and now I'm working for Nationale Nederlanden, which is an insurance company. And I'm not here to sell you anything, but basically to share some ideas, what I've learned, and to get your feedback, hopefully, because a part of it, what I will be talking about this morning is things that I think I've learned and that I've understood. And I also will stick my neck out, so to speak, to talk about things that I haven't really mastered yet, and where I have some initial ideas on how to do that. So I worked for this bank for 5 years, and we were pretty quick in adopting agile and continuous delivery. And in fact, that proved not to be that hard for us. It was, if the team level, you can easily adopt agile ceremonies, you can adopt continuous integration, automated testing, auto deployment. That was all fine, but the biggest problem for me was, and then a thing that still bugs me, is how can you do this at scale? How can you reorganize and basically re-engineer existing organizations to deliver software at scale using DevOps practices? So what I'll be talking about is a little bit the journey that I went through at ING in the Netherlands, and then how we try to scale that out to different countries. And after that, I'll talk a little bit about where I think that the key problem sits that we're not spending enough time on, which is the learning of people. Right, so my journey at ING starts in 2012, where we had an organizational structure that I completely misrepresented here for a clear purpose, right? We had some commercial guys, we had application developers, we also had operations guys for the applications, and we had infra developers, and we had infra operations guys. And this was my representation of our organizational structure. We had great ETL-based processes. We were on the road to be CMMI level 2 compliant. We had integrated Prince2, which is a program management method, with rational unified process, and all of that created this big process with around about 80 mandatory documents that had to be created before you could start coding. So, as you can imagine, we had a bit of a velocity problem here. And to solve that, some of our great engineers, so Danny Wijnand and Evelijn van Leeuwen and Nilgun van Raat, they said, what we want to do is start with agile. And they did that in the context of an application development department. So they started basically abolishing all process and process managers, neglecting all need for PIDs and what have you, and they just started pulling together a great team and creating code for a mobile application. And after that worked a little bit, our CEO, Ron van Kemenade, came to see, and then he found out that there was fantastic energy in these guys, right? There was this magnetism that was exuding from this place where these guys were just doing their work. And people started visiting those teams, and before we knew it, everybody wanted to do Agile Scrum in the context of that department. We had some great managers there too, Amira Rooney, who was just fantastic in just taking a team and taking them to have a look at how these guys were working. He helped them tremendously, and so imagine that it was absolutely forbidden to have anything but the standardized machines in our company, and he just went out and bought the first iMacs himself and hooked them up in a network. So you can imagine it was a little bit of a stressful time for some people, especially those that tried to enforce the rules upon this team of cowboys, but we felt we needed to, right? We were already convinced that software is eating the world. We were already convinced that the only way to be a better bank was to be better at software development. And we started talking to guys like Ken Schwaber from Scrum.org, and that was a great guy, because one of the problems that we had in the beginning trying to scale out Scrum You must remember this was the time that agile was the thing and continuous delivery still had to be invented a little bit. And we had this fantastic manager also, Bart Veugelers, who said, yeah, well, if I have to fix all the problems that these agile teams run into, then I can create a list of 1,000 things that we have to solve, and that will never end. And then we have to start this project that will take 10 years, and this will never work, right? So what we learned, and it was pretty crucial to our journey, Ken Schwaber said, no, this is not the way to go about it. You just have to listen to the teams. Listen to your teams, they will tell you what they need. And in the beginning, that was about things that we had not imagined as managers. The first thing that they said is, hey, we need bigger whiteboards because our scrum boards just suck, if I'm allowed to say that here. The other thing is, after a couple of days, they said, we also need different sticky notes because our procurement department had been so effective in buying the cheapest ones that they fell off the board within a day. So these were the kind of easy things to solve, right? And after a while, these things got a little bit more complicated. Hey, we want to deploy multiple times per day, but our operations organization is not completely happy with that. They want to see our test reports, and there's a template for it in Word, and it's not filled in. And you guys have these great automated test outcomes that we don't know how to handle. So what is this, right? Basically, what we were seeing, we were running into this next hurdle. And this is basically the journey that I experienced at ING, which was solving hurdle after hurdle, and often also involved a reorganization. So the next one was basically, hey, how can we integrate the work of the operations guys? By this time, how we were looking at the problem was heavily influenced by how Adrian Cockcroft was talking about Netflix. And Adrian was a bit of a radical. He was talking about no-ops. We couldn't do that, so we basically decided to put all the operations guys and all the development guys into the same team. And there was this big discussion, I remember, how many ops guys and how many dev guys should be in the one team, and how big should that team be, right? We only had a couple of things from theory to go by. Team should not be bigger than 9 people. That we wanted to respect. And how many developers would we then need? And then after a lot of negotiation, we came to the conclusion, 6 developers, 3 ops guys, all in one team. So this was the beginning of the DevOps journey. I remember talking about this at the GoTo conference, running into Jess Humble, who clearly told me that this was a stupid idea. But we didn't know it was a stupid idea. Yeah, some other people, Chris told me too. But we didn't know it was a stupid idea. For us, it worked. So by this time, we had 180 DevOps teams. And this was an amazing step. All the way from front-end development down to our mainframe systems where people were actually doing continuous delivery on the mainframe. We were trying to do it with the package suppliers too. Some of them were really helpful because they started to believe in this continuous delivery way of working and implementing it themselves too. So what we learned there is that our ecosystem is a little bit bigger than just our department, and that we could actually create this thing together. So DevOps, 180 teams, yeehaw! One thing we had left in place was that the dev guys were reporting into one line manager and the ops guys into another. That was not a good idea, so we had to fix that. Another one was what we had underestimated is that sense of identity of belonging to a department. So what we saw was especially the operations guys who were in the minority, they were trying to move their desks away as far as possible from the dev guys. And if there were any closets that they can put in between, they would try to do so, right? So this was a journey of learning together, also for us to discover really how this should be done. We tried to find, during these years in the market, other companies who had already done it to learn from. But it was a bit tough to find them, so we basically made the next move that made sense, and then the next, and this is how we continued forward. Now, this was an interesting time because for the first time, the developers could see in production what was bugging our customers. And there's this wonderful story where one of the developers found out, hey, according to our risk people at the bank, we cannot use the numerical keyboard part. There's a dot on it, right? And in the Dutch representation of money, you need to use a comma. So, and we cannot use the dot. We cannot automatically translate that to a comma because that would be a risk. And therefore, we were annoying 30,000 customers a day who were trying to use the obvious thing. Now, the guy said, I can fix this in code in 15 minutes and push it to production now. But our business colleagues said, oh, we need to have a meeting about this and a decision. And as you can see a bit, we were in this water, scrum, fall kind of situation where we needed to do more and basically tackle the next hurdle. As a side note, this is where we found the book from Jess Humple, the colleague of Nicole, who wrote this fantastic book about continuous delivery. We handed this book out to everybody, asked everybody to read it and just do it. And some teams were more successful at that in the beginning than others, but this is how we approached this change. But now we were in this water scrum fall situation, and then we started talking to our business colleagues as a first step, and they said, well, actually, we think this is a great idea. You know what? We're going to take out 2 layers of management, and we're going to follow this whole team structure that you have here, and basically assign our business people into your teams. So the people who do the customer journey design, the product owners, were now just assigned to the teams, and a lot of decision power was going to the teams. This was an amazing step. We reorganized this, the whole software delivery in 13 tribes, one of them being an IT tribe, and this is where we now had 400 teams, and things were getting to be very interesting, because we now had 400 teams who were speeding up, and we were coming into this situation where 400 teams basically had the ability to change the runtime of the bank once a day, or 2 times a day. So how do you cope with that amount of change, with that amount of teams? So this is where we started looking into building security and safety into our continuous delivery pipelines even more. So the red-blue deployments, the automatically failing over, those kind of things, that was really interesting at this period in time. But we still had a hurdle, and that was if we wanted a new server, it would take us 3 months or 6 months, and that was becoming a problem. So then we decided to have this thing called private cloud. Now, I'm probably not being completely correct by saying that I think this is not the best idea in the world. But what we did is automate the provisioning of all the VMs internally, automate the networking internally, and slowly speeding that up. The difficulty that we had here in 2016, so last year, was that we still had these manual IT risk processes. Now, IT risk in a bank is a very important function. It is even required by law to have a first, second, and third line of defense, also when it comes to IT, right? So we had to rethink and redesign how we do that. So this year, we really started engineering this also into the pipeline, simplifying our control frameworks, and starting to realize that what the private cloud people called private cloud and PaaS and continuous delivery, that these things were actually the same thing, and that we should not build this up from 2 different departments. So this is the journey of ING. Now, for me, what was the most difficult part was how can you teach so many people new skills in 5 years' time, right? And how can you do this quicker? How can you have this dialogue in an easier way with less stress? How can you avoid having 6 or 7 reorganizations that are stressful to everybody in the company? Can we do this at once? So this is where I left ING, basically now to join NN and try to do it faster. I'm not sure I will be successful at that, or we will be successful at it, but this is for me the big challenge. This is so interesting. And I think that besides agile and continuous delivery, we have to call out that there are a number of fundamental shifts, right? So one is, a lot of people today in IT departments are kind of managing that other people do the work. A lot of the work is outsourced to third parties, so there's a lot of overhead involved, and all of this overhead really doesn't help. So moving from managing that everybody else does the work, that you have your risk lists covered, that you have your checkboxes dotted, or whatever that is in English, and basically shift everybody, teach everybody how to do engineering again. So this is a big shift. The other one, with all due respect to the agile folks in the room, hopefully I will not make you very angry this morning, but we were in this place where a lot of people were doing agile for doing agile. Coaches that were teaching everybody to do the perfect stand-up in the morning that should not last any longer than 15 minutes, doing great retrospectives, and all that is fantastic. But if you're on a TIBCO stack and we really want you to learn Java, and we really want you to learn REST, that in itself doesn't help. If you're a fantastic agile coach and you have no inkling about software engineering, then it becomes really hard to be a great coach. If you have an IT manager who is a great manager and a lovely guy or lady, wonderful people person, but if they don't know what engineering really is and what it looks like, then it becomes really tough, because then you have to teach all of them how to do this quicker. Huh? And of course, drawing from my own experience, I've been lucky enough to work a number of times for a great IT manager. And that's where I learned my skills. Working for somebody or with somebody who's actually fantastic is the way to become better at your work. So how can we move everybody to this different state without 5 or 6 reorganizations? That is an important thing. And last but not least, at ING we also cleaned up a lot of technical debt. Not even all of it, right? Some of our stuff is still on the mainframe, but we got rid of Sun Solaris, we got rid of AIX, we got rid of WebSphere, we got rid of a number of technologies and standardized more and more. Now, why is that so important? And I can hear Nicole's words of this morning echoing in my head. Please let the people choose the tools they like. I'm all in favor of that. But if you want to automate continuous delivery across 1,000 technologies, you will not get anywhere. And that's a bit of a problem, right? Because the opportunity is to make sure that you get all of your risk and IT controls automated too. For example, if you have to automate creating secure connections between components, you can basically have everybody try to automate that for themselves, but you can also do it once for everybody. But then it really starts to be helpful if you have a limited set of technologies that you want to support, because otherwise you'll be too slow. So this trade-off of, hey, where do we need to standardize? And I know that the word standardize doesn't sound very welcome in an agile community, but where can we standardize to gain speed was a big discussion here. And I'm still in favor of standardizing some of the stuff, because it helps you to be faster. So now for me the big question is, the one that gets me out of bed every morning is, now we know a little bit what good looks like, the teams, the tribes, the tech, the continuous delivery pipelines. Is there a way that we can do this faster and less stressful? Yeah? And we have to, of course, we already heard it, software is eating the world. Tech is changing a lot. right? Evolving interactions, the virtual reality, the APIs, the REST architecture that is invading our enterprises, artificial intelligence everywhere, which takes a lot of discipline on your data models, the rise of the platforms. I will talk a little bit about that because I think this one is crucial for many, because in the tech that we have today, it is easier to share stuff without making it impossible for teams to create their own features on top of that layer, right? So I'm really in favor of having this discussion in the big enterprises about IT platforms and discussing also a bit with the board, hey guys, this is how the world is changing, this is how business models are changing. Of course, security, privacy, transparency, these things can no longer be left to one team or to 400 teams. Last time I checked at ING, we had 750 teams on our Git repository and 400 on our pipeline. So you wanna deliver to them this safe way of working so they can focus on creating value. Does this make sense to you? Yeah? So for me, the big question here is not about continuous delivery and creating little robotic scripts. It's about how can we help the people learn and develop faster. A little bit about these platforms. So platform is the new business model, right? And it's a scary one. It's how companies like Google, Airbnb, and Uber create the new monopolies. They are the new monopolies, and they can dictate to us how we use our free time, and they can dictate to us how and where we deliver our services. So this business model has to be understood, and also the tech behind it. So these platforms, so like Uber, they serve an ecosystem. They're not longer a pipeline business model. It's not my product that I deliver to you. No, they deliver a platform, a layer of tech to people who create products and people who consume products and who find each other on your platform. And this delivers tremendous scalability if you take into account a number of constraints. You want to eliminate gatekeepers. I'll leave that in for, for the risk guys. You want to run on a not even mine inventory if you can. So for example, Uber doesn't own any cars yet. Google doesn't own any content. They just use the content that's available there. Airbnb does not own any hotels or rooms. Facebook does not create any content, as far as I know, by themselves. They let you create the content, and they are just this big AI who is focused on creating as much engagement as they can, while putting some advertisements in your streams. So these platforms are kind of vital. This is an architectural concept, a business concept that I talk a lot about in NN, because they are a vehicle to do transformations faster. So now, I want to embark on an unreasonable plan. So a plan is unreasonable if there are a lot of people telling you it cannot be done. And that's good, because when they start talking about why it cannot be done, you know what the constraints are that you have to solve, or impediments in agile lingo, right? So can we do this faster? And there are three things that I've learned that I want to share with you, and then talk a little bit about how I think we can do this faster. So one is the fundamental attribution problem. If you want people to learn new skills, and they don't, it's very natural for people to blame other people that they're not learning it, right? But it's up to us to create a context for them to actually be able to learn it. If you have a developer who's in this death march to deliver a migration of a system by the end of this year, and you want him to spend a lot of his time doing the test automation, you make it very hard. So how can you create this context for people to really learn faster? And there are a number of ideas from basically from the book from the Heath brothers, I will come to that, is how you can help people see what good looks like faster. So one is the bright spots. So NN, we have a team that already created wonderful pipelines to AWS and Azure, but it took them 1.5 years to get there. So why did it take 1.5 years to get there? Because they had to learn a lot of new skills. And for people in the organization to learn that, you can leverage this bright spot in the organization basically to show them, okay, this is how we really invested time. This is how the IT manager himself went to all the training courses himself just to be part of the team and lead the way. So having bright spots and using them in your organization really helps. And there's this other thing that I learned from a professor at University of Delft. He said, Henk, if you want to do this structured change, you have to be clear about a number of things. So the what, the why, and the how. Because sometimes people get stuck. If you paint this fantastic vision of where you want to be, and in your mind you're already there because you have this creative way of thinking, for a lot of people it's not clear if the vision is clear, but not, hey, how can we see what good looks like, and then how do we actually get there? So being clear about this change is very important going forward for me. And I will get to that a little bit later. The other thing that I learned was that we are re-engineering stuff that is really, really, really complex. Right? If you're at a bank with 5,000 VMs and they're all interconnected and you have teams that are allowed to change that, then you're dealing with a complexity that is mind-boggling. It is impossible, also for me, to understand the impact of a change that they do. Right? So our reliance on continuous delivery has become huge, because if something fails as a result of a change, you want to be able to roll it back, ideally in seconds or even in milliseconds. And the other thing is, it's not just about the software, it's about the people. And people learn differently. People cannot be programmed by a script, they learn differently, they need to be convinced or invited to be convinced. And if you're dealing with thousands of people that you want to move to a different way of thinking, help them do a paradigm shift at all levels in the organization, and things are getting a little bit more complex, and designing the right feedback loops for everybody to see that they're on the right track is a design effort that needs to take place before you start doing that. The other thing that I learned is that in software engineering, in our industry, we went down the wrong track a little bit when we implemented this concept of an assembly line. And this was instigated a bit by the Rational Unified Process guys, I think, who were starting to talk about disciplines, and then by the SIs in the industry who thought, a discipline is a role, I can sell somebody on that role. Right? So all of a sudden you had people who were requirement specifiers, that was a role, or a designer, or a tester, or a business architect, or a solution architect. And software engineering is not like an assembly line. It's not like I put this nut on a bolt 1,000 times per day. It's not like that. It's a creative trade, right? We load a humongous problem in our minds, and by the time we understand it and can start playing with it, then we've really understood it. And from that we start designing and coding and testing. And that time that it takes to really understand the problem that you're trying to resolve and the test that you need to do, that time is basically the time it takes for a handover between people. Now, if I have all these roles and people needing to do these handovers, this is where we lose a lot of time. This is where we lose a lot of time. So I'm really in favor of teaching people all these disciplines. So teaching them how to analyze a problem, teaching them how to design for a problem, teaching them how to test it, teaching them how to create the test scripts, teaching them how to code it, teaching them how to deploy it, how to monitor it, basically everything. Brings the software engineers home. right? Because our trade is about all these things. It's about all these aspects, not just one of them, everything. And that means that we have to re-engineer how we do HR in software engineering. So we stole a concept from Andy Hunt. He's one of the guys that signed the Agile Manifesto. He's now working on a fantastic new methodology. Please have a look at it. It's called Growth. And Andy is really focused on how do we teach people and teams new skills quickly, and how can we help people to move from actually being novices to at least competent. Now, the other idea that I want to share with you and that we tried out at ING is, hey, if we can map this not per se per skill, because testing would be a skill and test automation would be a different skill, a little bit different, and coding would be a little bit different skill. But if we say we define now for our people that being competent is having the ability to do everything to take user stories from an idea to production, right? If we define that as competent, independent of the technology that they're working on, because technology is just technology, right? You can learn a new programming language. But if we define it like that, then we can actually start ranking people to salary scales. Now, this sounds a bit like having a plan here, but it's crucial, because for the first time now we could actually rate people on very clear behaviors to their actual contribution to our software delivery process. And there's a huge business case for this. So when we started to do the mapping, we could see that people at salary scale 12, some of them were really salary scale 9. I will not share the percentages here, but it was a significant amount, right? And we could offer everybody also a clear career path, right? This is what you have to learn. And then we could ask the teams as a team to take responsibility for teaching each other the skills at a certain speed. The business case is a little bit like this, and Andy was the first one to really open my eyes to it. And he said, listen, people who are at the higher levels can be 20 times as productive, sometimes 50 times as productive as people at the lower level. Now imagine that that is true. Imagine that there's a correlation, and Nicole, maybe this is something to research, but imagine that there's a correlation between the skill level and the actual productivity, and also the breadth of the skills, that you can indeed take code, take a user story to production all by yourself without any handovers. Then the business case for investing in people is fantastic. And I think that is severely lacking in our industry today. So how can you make companies aware that investing in engineering skills is actually the best thing that we can do today? And that it is a very good idea, actually, to take some of the time that people have allocated to delivering results and reallocate it to learning extra skills, because it will speed up your whole enterprise. There's this fantastic article, by the way, if you're looking for a little bit of evidence. It is on the web. It's called Coding for Uncle Sam, and it describes how the Obamacare website was created. It took something like $200 million, if I'm not mistaken. And when the whole thing was in trouble, it did not perform, people didn't know how to use it, and they asked a couple of Silicon Valley-type engineers to revamp it. And they redid basically the whole of it for $4 million. Potentially, they were a bit more expensive. But the difference in productivity is huge. The Obama administration had allocated $70 million per year for maintenance. These guys said, just give us the 4, according to this article. And I have seen in ING and other companies that I've consulted at before that these huge differences in productivity exist. And we need to start understanding what they are and how we can help our people to become proficient at that level. So maybe I should take a little bit of time to explain this, right? Because we need a model for how people learn. And people who are novices learn differently than experts. And experts are often lousy teachers for the novices. They get annoyed, and the novices get frustrated or anxious, and that really doesn't help. So novices need clear instructions, simple tasks with a guideline to the real work. Competent advanced beginners, you can see a shift in behavior when they start looking up in the manuals what they need to learn, and they no longer start by reading page 1 and then to the end of the book, but they just jump to the chapter that they need, right? So they are now becoming aware that they can learn much faster. So competent means basically that you have everything in-house. Now the good thing about this level is that you can actually observe it as an IT manager very quickly in the behavior of people. You can just have a look with one of your guys into their Git repository and look at, hey, what is it that you're actually producing? Are you doing test code? Are you doing design? Are you doing the coding itself? Are you creating any deployment or monitoring scripts? So you can see how well versed they are in this in engineering. It doesn't take long to do an assessment on that. Now, proficient is even more interesting, because this is where you teach people, you push them out of their safe world and you say, okay, now you've learned how to do this in Java, here's a new language, and here's a new architecture, please do it again. So this is where you teach people basically how to be independent of technology. This is where you start training their intuition. And the experts are rare. They are the guys who can basically see through a problem and do it in any kind of language. Now, having this as a career path is important, because now we can attach salary scales to experts and proficient engineers that are much higher than their managers. And then all of a sudden the whole thing becomes interesting for everybody, because now I can have a career by staying an engineer manager. So let's take this problem and make it a little bit bigger, right? And I hope I'm not challenging you too much with my wild ideas here, but we have to be clear on the why, what, and how at various levels in the enterprise, or nothing will move. Or nothing will move. And that means that we have to reduce the number of roles, because otherwise we get into this very big exercise of trying to specify what people should do, and that doesn't help. But we should be clear about the roles at various levels, at the human level, at the team level, and what are they responsible for, all the way up to the board. And it also means that we have to explain what the role at board level is in an existing insurer that is becoming a tech company. Right? And what is shifting there? So clarity on the why, what, and how, and then basically specifying that for various layers. It just took 4 in the organization. And then you can get to a situation where you can actually start thinking about, okay, what do I have to explain to my board for them to manage this new asset called, I don't know, an insurance platform. And then you get into these interesting discussions, right? Because the board, the CEO will say, probably, what I'm managing is a balance sheet and risk. And I'm doing that with a forecast for 30 years. And then you have to ask the question, where on your balance sheet is actually this valuable software that is creating these results for you, right? So translating the purpose and basically what it is at various levels has to be done for a whole organization to shift. Otherwise, you get these start and stop moments, these hurdles that you have to overcome all of the time. So tribes could be responsible for a module in that platform contributing to the same purpose and having distinct responsibilities in there. Teams are responsible for a number of components, etc. And all these things are now managed as a software product. which is a big shift too, right? If you're in a bank or an insurer, everybody will tell you that we are managing banking products. And we've created this new, wonderful, disruptive, new type of account. Okay, what is it? Well, it's an orange account. Okay, what is that? And then you see that there's a lot of marketing around very simple constructs. But the shift is that they're now responsible for software that's actually in production. Somebody is responsible end-to-end, surface-to-core, for the mobile app that is delivering an absolute experience for our customers every day. It's not the account, whether it's orange or not, that delivers that experience. It's the very software that's delivering the experience. So shifting this in the very DNA of large organizations is an important thing. So all of these things are products. Now, getting down to the lowest level, what you see here is at the right, at your right, is also how a new CMDB, a component management database, is actually constructed, with clear responsibilities assigned to clear people at the left side. This is something that I did too late at ING. Making sure that we can actually manage the software of a bank as a whole, and then taking it down to the lowest levels. Okay, what does this look like in the CMDB? What does this mean for the responsibility of the teams who are organized in tribes and who contribute to some kind of platform, however we envision it? Make sense? Am I boring you with this? This is also possible, eh? Yeah? Which is also okay. This is a little bit less creative, right? This is really how you have to design the new form of an enterprise. And this also means that the why has to be explained differently, and that you have to talk about different concepts at various levels. So the tribe is responsible not only for the beautiful mortgages app that they deliver, but a lot of other parties are accessing your mortgages API too. Both are interfaces. So that means that we have to think about, okay, how do these methods that we can all find and learn about, how do they actually interrelate, and how can we make sure that all of that is reflected in the tool chain that supports our enterprise? So very quickly, I will show you a number of principles that were really helpful to me, right? So velocity is one. And we talked about the principle of velocity, which is not only speed, because building a lot of services on a TIBCO enterprise service bus is speed, but in 2 years' time, all of that speed is then technical depth, right? So is it the right direction? And having that discussion is crucial. Outcomes over impositions. Jeff Susna wrote a wonderful book, Designing Delivery. If you have time, please read it. This is very helpful for discussions with the risk people. What is it that we actually want to achieve, as opposed to these are the things that I impose upon a team. Shift left, humans versus robots, immutable servers, infrastructure is code. Took a long time. And I want to end with this, because this is really our challenge. Right? How can we learn faster in our industry, in our organizations? So, thank you.